Hi guys, it's Gilly Hunt with my A to Z guide to Stamping Up products, and we're on cue for quality and quickness with the Stamparatus. And if you remember, go back 2 days to Monday and you'll find that I introduced the Stamparatus, so that was our session 1. And this is now going to be session 2, which is going to be every other day. There's going to be a new session on what you can do with the Stamparatus. And I keep saying Stamparatus, Stamparatus, I'm still not even sure what it's called. But I love it all the same. And I'm not going to go back over the beginning part. So if you feel like you want more information about the actual tool itself and how to just use it, then please find Q for quality and quick with the Stamparatus, and that will be session 1. So this one is session 2, and we're going to look at special needs for all, dexterity. We're going to look at large stamps and tiny weeny ones actually too, and we're going to look at the accurate positioning of stamps. So that's what we're going to do today. So let's get started. Here's my Stamparatus, which we've already been introduced to, and I'm going to use it as I was when I last left it, with just the one plate in place. I'm not putting the second plate on here because we don't need it for what we're going to use today, so it's probably best just to put the one in. It works best under the camera too. I'm going to apologise for these weird balls of light shining up, but that's my lighting equipment and it's just a shiny piece of kit and I can't do anything about that, I'm afraid. So first of all, I want to just look at, let's just go and get ourselves a magnet from underneath. Remember, they're stored underneath, and I've put some washi tape around them just to make them easier to handle. So I just want the one magnet. Oh, and it's trying very hard to stick like mad. There we go. So once it's down, it's easier to slide it around to move it. So here's my piece of card, and I just want to have a little chat about stamps. So here's my rubber stamp. Remember, we've got no foam mat because I've already got some foam here. I've got the rubber and the foam is part of the stamp. So I always need foam when using it, so I don't need a foam mat here today, so I'm just going to pick that up. Now here's where I want to stop and have a think about dexterity. I'm very fortunate, I have fairly good dexterity, but as I'm getting older I'm aware that it's not as easy as it was to stamp. So first of all, inking your stamp. If you have dexterity problems, you can, if you need to, pick the whole thing up and use the whole plate onto your ink. That way you've got hold of the plate easily with 2 hands, or maybe you've got a damage to your hand. It means that you can hold a corner and you can do it like that. You can do it in all kinds of directions. You can link 1 finger, 2 fingers. So if you've got problems with dexterity with other fingers, then you can use it like that. Okay, so that's one great thing. So any problems with this, no worries. I also want to draw your attention though to the fact that if you find these hard to handle, these big stamp pads, that we do have for sale in the catalogue, these little, they're called linked stamps. Unlinked. Why did I call them linked? And they're not linked, they're inked. They're uninked stamps. Oh, let's carry on. Uninked stamping spots, and they're called spots because they're just small. Now you can use our re-inkers to soak these with ink, and they are much smaller and perhaps sometimes easier to hold. Not always, sometimes small is difficult. So there's 2 or 3 options. One is get yourself an uninked spot. I said it right that time. and fill it with some ink from one of our re-inkers. And if you're unsure about that or any of the things that come up in my videos, don't forget I'm really happy to chat with you. Come onto my blog, put comments in the box below, and I can get back to you with information. So I've just inked this then with Gorgeous Grape, and all I'm going to do is now close the book. Now, depending on your dexterity problems, you can close that in any number of different ways. And here's where the great thing about this is. A lot of the ladies I've worked with that have had dexterity problems have either had very weak wrists or they've not been able to put pressure on for a number of reasons. Well, the wonderful thing with this is that you can use your flat of your hand, you can use the side of your hand, you can use the back of your hand, you can use the front of your hand, you can turn it over, you can use one hand and another hand, but there's no real need to put much pressure on at all. And because it stays in one place, it's not shifting around, you're not having to worry about keeping it in place whilst you're putting pressure on. So you can do a come back to it, go back to it, try again, and you will get a lovely, lovely effect. And that's great for arthritis, for any of those problems that you have. I have an arthritic finger, I have a curly finger, sadly. I'm hoping it doesn't affect the rest of my hands, but it might. But I know that my Stamparatus is always going to be there and I can always use it. So we can use flat palms, we can lean on it with an arm. There are lots and lots of ways of getting some small amount of pressure onto this pad. Okay? And also the fact that it's not moving, it's not shifting. My father has a shake, and I know that, you know, if he was shaking, it's not a problem. The shake's not a problem. Okay, I can do this. The magnet is holding the paper in place, and this is holding this in place. So again, I can get a lovely, equal, beautiful image, even with a shaky hand too. Isn't that wonderful? I love it. I love it. I love it. Right. So that's the simplicity of working with this if you have some sort of problems with your hands. And many crafters sadly start crafting and then kind of give up because they really struggle later on in life. So please don't struggle. Just buy a Stamparatus and carry on stamping. Okay. How about the problem when you've got the tiniest, weeniest little stamps? When you've got a little teeny, weeny stamp, in fact I'm going to bring this flower back because we might just add it to the flower, it might be fun. Right, if I'm trying to stamp this with a conventional block, okay, let's just load up the ink. Now, sometimes what happens, it's happened rather more than normal even today. Right, I'm just going to get a little piece of paper to show you. Sometimes what happens, here we go, is that as you are inking it up, it wobbles about. Because it's so teeny, it kind of rocks around when you're trying to ink it up. And it's very easy to get a tiny bit on the side, but actually I've got tons on the side. And that means that when you go to stamp it and you rock a bit, you sometimes get a little bit of an edge or a little bit of a shadow because it transfers. So here's what's so wonderful. Let me just get rid of all this ink before I end up with it everywhere and we end up with a purple video. Okie doke. So let's have another go. Right, this time I'm going to position this little tiny weeny butterfly, let's say on the edge of the flower, just there. Okay, now I'm going to close it. Do you remember? We close it to pick it up. It's now picked up. The magnet holds the paper in place so we don't pick up the magnet. And now we're going to ink this, and look, the same has happened again. Because it's such a tiny little thing, it's making the ink tip onto the sides, but that's not a problem because when I close this, it's going to stay well above and out of the way. So I close it up and I press on that a couple of times, and I've now got the tiniest little pretty little butterfly sitting on the edge of my petal. And all of this ink is not a problem. It's not going to rock and roll and get in the way. The only problem it will be is if it's on there when I put my next stamp on there. Oh, and that's sprung out the way. There it is. Let's just catch it and bring it back for a quick clean. It obviously didn't fancy a wash. There we go. So that's two things to think about. Third thing to think about is, what if you want to use up your little scraps? Okay, and you just want to make some little labels with some greetings on. So let's put that across the corner, because we only need to just, oops, it's such a heavy label. Right, we want to put that in there, let's say. Okay, so we're going to pick it up again. We've got a very tiny area. Let's have a go. Tap, 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 just the same as if you were inking up any stamp on any block. Flip it over, give it a press. There we go. Ooh, and I've done it upside down, but that doesn't matter because it's a little piece. So, and I've now got that really nicely placed within that label. So you've got no excuse now. You're going to have to keep every last little tiny scrap, because you can use up all your scraps now. Isn't that marvellous? Right, what about the opposite problem to this teeny tiny problem? What about if we have, let's just put that on. Oh, now, before I pop that on, oh no, this is still red rubber, that's fine. I just had a feeling we'd gone to a photopolymer stamp, but we haven't. We're still with red rubber. Now, what if we've got a big stamp like this? It's not huge, because some, you know, we do have enormous big chunky ones. But when I try to put this on here, yes, it will fit on this block. But what if, and I can hold this sideways on quite successfully, but what if I want to do it at an angle? What if I want to do it in a different direction? Then it gets difficult, and then am I holding sides? Am I holding here? My little hands find it hard to hold these blocks. And so what I tend to do, bizarrely, is go to an even bigger block, like that, and I tend to try and hold it with two hands. That's my solution, but it's not always as easy as could be. However, Stamparatus makes it so simple, it's unbelievable. So I want it at the side here, so I'm just going to position it there. That's where I want it. That's easy to move it and shake it and move it and change it and do it how I want it. Much easier than managing a big block and trying to hold it. Flick it over, pick it up. And now, because it's a big, huge thing, what colour shall we use? Oh, I think we might just use this one. I love this. It's Mossy Meadow, which is, I think, one of my new favourites. It's a very subtle green. And it's a great alternative to black if you're wanting an outline for flowers or floral things. So that was easier, much easier to get inked up. And now all I have to do, I can press across this without having to hold it at the same time. So I'm not having to hold a great big block still and press, but I can now press here. I can roll my hand across. I can do it however I want. So if you're someone that needs to do it like this, it's up to you. Okay. Oh, now then, we've got a little problem here where it hasn't quite taken. So I was so busy messing around. Let me just fill this in. And this is the other brilliant thing, which I'm going to tell you all about on another occasion. But as we've come to it, I'll show you as it is. Okay. What we can do is, because this is still lined up, we haven't lost the lining up, I can go back and just squish this corner and make sure I've really got it. There we go. And I've now filled in those gaps where I had that problem. No worries whatsoever. So for this session 2, part 2, whatever we want to call it, that gives us some ideas about dexterity, using teeny stamps, big stamps, and the accuracy of positioning it. But the last thing I'm going to do is the accuracy of positioning something where we're linking together lots of stamps. So let's go for a set where we want to build something. And this set is an acrylic set. It's the Timeless Tulip set. And I'm going to use several pieces which I've already got out on the top here. But because it's acrylic, the one thing we do need to do is we need to put the piece of foam in. And remember from the introductory session, if we've got acrylics or photopolymer, this is photopolymer, we need the mat in. Okay? And I have got somewhere, oh no, where have I put them? Oh, here we go. I have got a pad of grid papers. Okay, you can buy these separately from the Stamparatus. They don't come with the Stamparatus, but they're relatively cheap. And it does mean that I can use this on top of my mat, just to protect the mat from getting ink all over it, but also to give me some grids so I can kind of still line things up nicely. Okay. You can also buy as an extra, if you don't want to be having lots of pieces of paper, you can actually buy a quality mat, which is an upgrade on this mat, which has a laminated surface one side and the foam on the other. So it's up to you which you prefer. So here we go. Now I want to build something for this one, and I've got a particularly slightly longer piece of paper. And this is going to be quite important. Let me just shunt it so you can see this end here. We've gone outside of the size of the Stamparatus. Okay, so it's hanging over the end, and I'm going to show you why in a minute. And this is the great thing about having a tool which is open-sided on two sides. It means you can work with quite large piece of paper. You can work on a 12 by 12 piece of paper and just move it and change from corner to corner to do your work. So here we go. I'm going to put it into the middle. I like, if I can, to place things near the middle, and this is where the grid lines are great because I can just make sure it's lined up and neat and centered. I like to work in the middle because there is a little element by the hinges, which you saw a minute ago, where it doesn't always quite take if you haven't pressed enough. There's a bit more give in the middle here, so when you're pressing it goes a bit further. So if you can, work in the middle. Right, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put my tulip on. Okay, and I'm going to pick it up, and I'm going to do my tulip. And in fact, the paper moved a tiny bit, so I'm going to get my extra magnet, and I'm just going to put my extra magnet on this side. It is quite a big piece of paper, so I don't want it to shift around. Okay, so let's take, what am I going to use for this one? Let's use some, let's try a little bit of Flirty Flamingo. Okay, so I'm going to ink up my tulip. It's a Flirty Flamingo tulip. And there it goes. And yet again, look, I've been saved from that gooey bit, but it doesn't matter. Okay, there's my lovely Flirty Flamingo tulip. And now I want, because we are talking about, and I'm just going to use my chamois to just get rid of that ink. It shouldn't move and it shouldn't go, but I do like to get rid of it if I can. I'm now going to use the stalk. Remember to put the side down where the... Okay, so I've put down the side that's going to do the stamping. And we've stuck that down. It was a good job I did the two, wasn't it? It's quite a sticky one. And I'm going back to my mossy meadow for the stalk. Here we go. And there it goes. One mossy meadow stalk, beautifully aligned at the top, because that's where we want it to. That's where we want it to be aligned with. Now I'm going to align a little bit of a, oops, let's get rid of the stalk. Let's, oh, put my finger on it. It's really, this is quite a new set and it's very sticky still. So let's pick it up. Let's grab some ink onto that. And there is the leaf, nicely in place. Aren't these coming out beautifully? And now what I want to do is I want to add some writing for my greeting, but I don't want to put it on here. I want to put it off the page. So here's the easy peasy thing you can now do. Right, we don't always have to work the right way up. We can simply turn this round. Okay, now the only complication is I have to remember that my writing has to be the right way round, which will be upside down. So that's where my writing's going to go, and I'm going to leave a space to put a piece of ribbon in when I do. Here we go. And I think we might go back to some Flirty Flamingo for the writing. Here we go. And now can you see what I've done is I have used the entire length of that piece of card, even though it comes outside of the area of the Stamparatus. So I hope that gives you just a few ideas and a few little things so that you're ready to come back again in the very, very near future for session 3, which will be looking at getting your greetings nice and straight and lined up. Having a go at second chance inking where you have a problem and you need to go back and you need to put something right. And also looking at stamping on specialist card. So we're going to look at stamping using the Stamparatus on textured card, which is always difficult, and on vellums and window sheets, which sometimes when you're hand stamping can smear and smudge. So lots of tips and tricks if you come back. Remember, you're only having to wait one day off and then I'll be back. Okay, thanks very much. Bye-bye.